The wooden panels of Courtroom 6 carried an old smell of dust, paper, and polish. The ceiling fan hummed slowly overhead, slicing the warm air in a rhythm that echoed the tension in the room. Every seat was filled, reporters balanced notepads on their knees, lawyers shuffled case files, and townspeople who had nothing to do with the trial pressed shoulder to shoulder, eager to watch what they believed would be the downfall of one man. That man was Abdul Rahman, a factory worker, father of 3, whose hair had turned from jet black to streaks of gray long before his time. His wrists were bound in steel cuffs, the faint clink of chains following him like an accusation. His eyes, however, held no sign of defeat. He sat straight, head high, though his son beside him could see the exhaustion in his breathing. The prosecution had painted Rahman as a violent man, accused of theft and assault during a factory protest that had turned bloody. But those who knew him, his neighbors, his family, saw a different picture. A man who worked from dawn until his palms blistered, a man who shared his bread with those who had none. Yet in the machinery of law, truth often bent under the weight of politics, and Rahman's case was already leaning toward a guilty verdict. At the front of the courtroom sat Judge Karim, a man known for his cold precision. He had been in a wheelchair for nearly a decade, his lower body paralyzed after a late-night accident. Stories whispered that he was once a fiery, fearless man, a judge who would pace before the bench like a lion in its den. Now, he ruled from a seated position, his dark eyes sharp above his rigid frame. Few dared to pity him, for his authority remained intact, perhaps sharpened by the chair that chained him to stillness. The trial had stretched for weeks. Witness after witness had been called, some coached, some frightened into perjury. The defense faltered against the tide. And so, when the judge announced that sentencing would follow the day's session, a heaviness fell over the Rahman family like a storm cloud. It was then that Ibrahim, Rahman's eldest son, barely 20, stood up. He was thin, his clothes too loose, his face pale with sleepless nights. Yet his eyes glowed with something unshaken, faith, or desperation, or perhaps both. "Your Honor," he said, voice trembling yet clear, "before you pass judgment on my father, I ask you for a chance to prove his innocence." The courtroom stirred. Such interruptions were rare, almost suicidal. Lawyers turned in annoyance, reporters leaned forward, and the judge narrowed his gaze. "This is not a stage for sentiment, young man," Judge Karim said firmly. "Your father's fate will be decided by law, not by spectacle." But Ibrahim didn't sit. His hands gripped the wooden railing before him, knuckles white. "Law, Your Honor, should serve justice. And justice demands truth. If you allow me, I will give you proof my father deserves freedom." A ripple of laughter broke across the audience. Proof. This trembling boy thought he could outdo the attorneys, the evidence, the months of testimony. Even the prosecutor smirked, exchanging glances with colleagues. The judge's patience thinned. "And what proof could you possibly present, son? The court is not a playground for riddles." Ibrahim inhaled deeply, his chest rising and falling like a man about to dive into deep water. His words came slow, deliberate, each syllable carrying a weight that silenced even his father's attempt to hush him. "Let my dad go," he said, "steady now, and I'll make you walk." For a second, silence swallowed the room. Then it cracked wide open. Laughter burst forth like thunder. It wasn't the polite chuckle of disbelief but the cruel laughter of those who found amusement in another's humiliation. Reporters scribbled frantically, some shaking their heads. The prosecutor laughed outright, slapping his palm against the table. Even the guards exchanged smirks, struggling to maintain composure. The absurdity of it was undeniable. The judge, paralyzed for 10 years, confined to his chair by doctors, specialists, and fate itself, made to walk again by the trembling voice of a boy. It was madness, sheer madness. Judge Karim's lips curved, not in humor but in disdain. "Order in the court," he barked, pounding his gavel once. The laughter hushed, though a few muffled chuckles lingered. His eyes bore into Ibrahim like steel. "Do you mock this court, boy? Do you mock me?" "No, Your Honor," Ibrahim replied, his voice unwavering. His hands still trembled, but his tone carried a strange calmness, a conviction that unsettled even those who scoffed. "I speak only the truth. Free my father, and I will make you rise to your feet before this court." Gasps mixed with murmurs. Some whispered that the boy had gone mad with grief. Others wondered if this was some desperate trick, a last-ditch attempt to stall sentencing. Rahman, shame flooding his face, pulled his son's sleeve, hissing under his breath, "Sit down, Ibrahim. Don't do this. Don't make it worse." But Ibrahim stood rooted, as if the ground itself had chosen him for this defiance. The judge studied him, silence stretching longer than it should. His dark eyes revealed nothing, no anger, no amusement, only calculation. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "You speak boldly for one so young," Karim said slowly. "Perhaps too boldly. Do you not realize the gravity of your words? To promise what the finest physicians in this country have declared impossible, it borders on blasphemy." Ibrahim swallowed hard but did not waver. "I realize the gravity, Your Honor. That is why I say it." Another wave of whispers filled the courtroom. The judge rapped his gavel again. His gaze flickered briefly to the audience, then back to the boy. "You claim you can perform the impossible. Very well. Should I indulge this madness? What say you all?" A chorus of murmurs followed. Some shouted, "Nonsense," while others, intrigued, urged him to allow it. After all, what harm could come from exposing the boy's folly? The prosecutor rose, bowing slightly. "Your Honor, with respect, this is a waste of the court's time. A child's delusion has no place in legal proceedings. I urge you to dismiss this distraction." But the judge raised his hand. His eyes lingered on Ibrahim, sharp and probing, as though trying to pierce through him and uncover the source of his certainty. Something in the boy's demeanor, though absurd, demanded attention. Finally, the judge's voice cut through the murmurs. "Very well, let it be seen. If you claim to possess this power, then you shall demonstrate it here, in this court, before all who witness." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the scribbling of pens and the flutter of papers. Reporters' eyes gleamed with excitement. They had walked in expecting a routine sentencing and now found themselves at the doorstep of a spectacle no newspaper could resist. Ibrahim's face remained calm, though his pulse thundered within him. His father stared at him in horror, his lips moving in silent prayers. "Approach," the judge commanded. And as Ibrahim stepped forward, every eye followed. Some with ridicule, some with pity, and a few with a creeping unease they could not explain. The boy stopped before the bench, his small frame dwarfed by the gravity of the moment. He looked directly at Judge Karim, his voice soft but clear enough to pierce the silence. "I told you, let my dad go, and I'll make you walk." The words hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order itself, and the courtroom, which only moments before had roared with laughter, sat now in hushed anticipation, waiting for what would come next. For a moment after Ibrahim's words, the room seemed frozen in time. The air itself felt thick, like it resisted being breathed. Everyone inside the courtroom, lawyers, journalists, guards, and even Abdul Rahman himself, looked not at the boy, but at the judge, waiting for the eruption they expected. Surely Judge Karim would unleash his fury on this child who dared mock him with the very thing that had broken his life, his paralysis. But the explosion did not come. Instead, the judge's lips pressed into a thin line. His dark eyes narrowed, not with rage but with the cold scrutiny of a man weighing a gamble. His fingers tapped against the polished wood of the bench, a soft but deliberate rhythm. Finally, he spoke, his voice controlled but carrying an edge. "Young man, if you are deceiving this court, I will not only pass sentence on your father but charge you with contempt. Do you understand the risk you take?" Ibrahim nodded once. "I understand." His father's whisper cracked the silence. "Ibrahim, please, stop this madness. Don't drag yourself into my fate." Abdul Rahman's voice was raw, torn between fear and shame. But Ibrahim only placed a hand on his father's shoulder, steady, as if grounding him. His eyes never left the judge. The courtroom buzzed again, whispers flowing like currents. Some scoffed at the boy's audacity, others leaned forward with morbid curiosity. Reporters scribbled like men possessed, realizing that this trial, ordinary in every other way, was turning into a spectacle that would fill headlines for weeks. Finally, Judge Karim lifted his gavel and struck it once. Crack. "Enough. This court will allow the demonstration." A collective gasp swept the hall. The prosecutor leapt to his feet, red-faced. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. We are here to uphold law, not indulge the fantasies of a desperate boy." The judge's stare cut him short. "Silence. If the boy speaks lies, he will be dealt with. But if he does not, we will all have witnessed something extraordinary. Let it proceed." And so the room quieted. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Abdul Rahman lowered his head into his hands. And Ibrahim stepped forward into the center of the courtroom, his every movement echoing in the silence like footsteps in a cathedral. He turned toward the judge. The boy's face had none of the arrogance of a trickster, nor the desperation of a gambler. There was only calm, and something else, something that unsettled those who looked too closely, a quiet certainty. "I will ask for nothing but silence," Ibrahim said softly. "Silence, and your belief for only a moment." The crowd stilled. Even the journalists paused their furious scribbling. Ibrahim closed his eyes. His lips moved, though no sound came. Those nearest swore they heard a whisper, like the flutter of leaves in wind. His hands rose slowly, one pressing over his heart, the other lifting outward, palm open toward the judge. For a long moment, nothing happened. Skepticism began to creep back, tugging at the corners of mouths that had almost opened in awe. And then it began. The judge's right hand, resting motionless on the arm of his wheelchair, twitched. It was slight, barely a flicker of muscle, but unmistakable. His brows furrowed in shock. He had not felt movement there in years. The whispering started instantly. "Did you see that?" "No, it was nothing." "I swear." His hand moved. Then his left foot shifted. Just a few inches forward, the heel scraping the floor. Karim gasped aloud, his composure breaking for the first time in public memory. He stared at his own legs as though they belonged to another man. His hands gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles whitening, as he tried to push himself upright. The crowd rose half from their seats. Some shouted, some cursed, others prayed aloud. The guards exchanged terrified glances. And then, slowly, trembling with effort, Judge Karim stood. The sound of wood scraping against stone as his chair rolled back was louder than thunder. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air seemed unwilling to move. The judge swayed unsteadily, both hands gripping the bench for balance. His eyes glistened with disbelief, but his body, long thought dead below the waist, was carrying him. One step, his shoe struck the marble floor with a heavy finality. A cry broke from the crowd. Some covered their mouths, others fell to their knees. Lawyers who had mocked the boy just minutes earlier stared in horror, their faces pale as paper. Another step, then another. Judge Karim was walking, slowly, shakily, but undeniably walking. The room dissolved into chaos. Reporters scribbled furiously, some shouting for photographers who had already dropped their cameras in shock. Guards muttered prayers. A woman fainted near the back. But through it all, Ibrahim stood calm, his hands still pressed over his heart, his face serene. At last, Karim reached the center of the courtroom. He turned toward the boy, his chest heaving, eyes burning with a mixture of awe and fear. His voice trembled. What have you done to me?" Ibrahim lowered his hand and opened his eyes. "Nothing, Your Honor. I only reminded your body of what it had forgotten. The rest was always within you." The judge's lips parted, but no words came. He staggered once, steadying himself against the bench. Slowly, he turned back toward the courtroom, facing the sea of astonished faces. "Let the record show," he said, his voice shaking yet strong, "that this court has witnessed a miracle today." He paused, his gaze finding Abdul Rahman, still frozen in disbelief. "And let it also show, that no man whose son carries such faith can be called guilty of dishonor. Abdul Rahman is hereby acquitted. Remove his chains." The gavel struck, but its crack was drowned beneath the roar that erupted in the courtroom. Shouts of shock, cries of joy, the clatter of reporters running for telephones, chaos swallowed order whole. Abdul Rahman collapsed into his son's arms, tears carving paths down his weathered cheeks. My boy, what have you done?" he whispered. Ibrahim held him tightly. "I only kept my promise, Baba." Judge Karim, still unsteady on his feet, sank back into his chair. But the look in his eyes had changed. Gone was the cold detachment that had ruled his courtroom for years. In its place burned something else: humility, wonder, and perhaps, for the first time in a decade, hope. The courtroom, once filled with mockery and laughter, had been silenced by the impossible. And as the chains fell from Abdul Rahman's wrists, every soul present understood they had not merely witnessed justice, they had witnessed something greater, something that would be told and retold for generations. The day a boy's words made a judge rise and walk.